one of the things about it is that there's so much to it. When an album comes out, you've got the music, but then you've got like the music video, you've got the performance video, you've got many, many live stages that the artist does for that song. And you've got like the dance practice videos, and then often you have other stuff. You have these like cinematic trailers that go along with it, and all this other stuff that goes along with the album. That's just kind of like a general commentary about how much you get out of it, and how there's like all these different ways to approach K-pop.
Welcome to Untangling Ourselves. This is the second of a two-part interview with Rob about finding joy in music. For part 1, where we cover Rob's journey through music, go back to episode 3 of the podcast. We talk there about his search through goth, electronic, and experimental for new, mind-blowing sounds. Today we're talking about K-pop. Rob thought he was searching everywhere for sounds that could change the way he sees music, and he felt lost for several years. He finally found an endless source of fun, creativity, and new ways of literally seeing music when he gave in to becoming a K-pop fan. We talk about how the spectacular creativity of K-pop loops back to MTV in the 1980s, and we explore what fandom means in this repressive political moment. If you're new to K-pop, you'll learn about eras, comebacks, bias, and how much you're missing. If you're already a fan, I hope you'll be nodding along as we celebrate the abundant audiovisual world of K-pop's last decade. And if you end the episode curious to learn more, whether you're already a fan or just getting to know K-pop, Rob has many music reviews and playlists on his blog, The Aquamarine Layer. I'll link that in the show notes, along with playlists and links to specific bands that we mention in the show, so definitely check that out.
Okay, now we're getting towards like the 2020s. We ended and thought we were done with a very awful presidency. That didn't turn out that we were done, but at the time it felt like we were liberated from that. And then we went, during that transition, we went into a pandemic and we were all home and we were all having kind of a big reset in terms of what does this mean? Like, what is the meaning of life if we're not ever seeing anyone or connected, being present with others. In my personal life, I was also at home not doing much, and I hadn't really had much of a thing before that, although I was also always very busy with work and family life and going on trips and whatnot. But I didn't have like something electrifying me the way that music used to. But during like kind of most intense part of the shelter in place and everyone staying home and not even going to the store and stuff like that, it just got me thinking, like, what is the point of life? Like, when I get through this, how am I gonna really live, quote unquote, to make up for this time period? And that brought to mind the feeling of being at shows and at music events, DJ events or whatever, and just like being present in the moment with other people and appreciating music as being like moments when I've been really alive and present and had that feeling where kind of like the past and the future just like melt away and I can live in the moment. And that sort of like crystallized in my mind as something that I really needed to return to once we could do things again.
And you had experienced that in some of the previous subcultures that you'd been in, but it wasn't necessarily what you were aiming at.
I mean, yeah, that feeling, I went to tons of shows in college. I got that feeling of being totally immersed in sound, being with my people, being like, having a very immersive experience in those shows. And I had like tons of fun doing that. Here and there, we went to Elaine Grimaud's recital in New York City that one time, and that was just like incredible experience. We were like so far away, we could barely see her.
A mile high. Yeah.
And we went to like see Marisa, the Brazilian fado singer that came to Davis that one time. That was like incredible. So just like one-off things like that. What I was lacking during that time was sort of like any reliable way to find these things.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
here I am, 2020, and I'm like, I need to re-engage with this. That's what this period of reflection has led me to, but I have no idea how. I don't know like what I'm into. I don't know who is doing that or where it's happening.
So you know what you want, but you have no idea what the next
Yeah.
step is.
And the only specific kind of music that I like that is like very fun is 80s pop music that is approaching 40 years old at
Yeah.
that point. Um, or I mean, the earliest year of it is 40 years old. And meanwhile, you randomly recommended that I go to this session on K-pop at the Homeschool California HSC conference that we went to, which at that time was online because of pandemic stuff. So there was the session where a mom talked about ways that you can use K-pop as part of like an educational journey and, learn a little bit about the language and learn a little bit about the culture. And she talked about like cooking Korean meals with her daughter, but also went into like the culture around it and the how the groups are structured and how fans can have a bias, which is their favorite member, and like all these different things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just kind of like interesting and intriguing and got me aware of that culture. That was just really interesting. And I had heard of K-pop before, but I had never really listened to it. I think I had heard the name BTS before. I had heard like the Gangnam Style song when it blew up and got a billion views, and even 30-something-year-olds who just read the news in their offices were hearing about it. But I definitely didn't know really anything about it. I mean, like when you're not used to it and you first visually see the groups, they're very young, or like you might see a group that's very young and like it looks like it's something that's like for people much younger
Mm-hmm.
than me.
And also very corporate, kind of pretty.
Corporate and it's produced. I've talked about how like pop music is very produced, but like K-pop maybe even more so than others because it's groups that are formed by companies, which is like an idea that kind of mostly died out in Western pop music after the Spice Girls and Little Mix and a few other groups in the 2000s. And Western pop became a lot more about soloists. So now I'm aware that it exists, and I thought certain things about it were intriguing from this session at a homeschool conference. And also I'm like home a lot and don't have as much to do or places to go as much because that's what we were all doing during the pandemic. And we had gotten our kids the family subscription to YouTube because we didn't want our kids to be watching ads whenever they saw YouTube. So we all had a family plan, and I never used YouTube at all, other than like I need to go
So
um,
funny now.
figure out how to fix something. So I'll like go find a video about that.
Uh-huh.
And then like we watched the stuff that our kids watched with them. I don't recall like what is the precise, this led to that, but like somehow I started looking up videos. I found some dance practice videos, which is one of the things that K-pop has. One of the things about it is that there's so much to it. When an album comes out, you've got the music, but then you've got like the music video, you've got the performance video, you've got many, many live stages that the artist does for that song. And you've got like the dance practice videos, and then often you have other stuff. You have these like cinematic trailers that go along with it, and all this other stuff that goes along with the album. That's just kind of like a general commentary about how much you get out of it and how there's like all these different ways to approach K-pop.
And that doesn't have a parallel in anything you were listening to before. I
No,
can't think
not
of
at
anything
all.
parallel. I mean, it's partly a YouTube culture where there's plethora of video. You can just
I
put out
mean,
100 videos about an album.
it's not parallel to anything I was into. Like what I was into didn't have that at all because it was more pure, or thought of itself as more purist. But even like Western pop music doesn't do all that stuff. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
very K-pop specific
Mm-hmm.
to go to that level with the amount of content that they push out
Yeah, they'll do
with
like
their albums.
maybe they'll do like a making of this, but
Yeah, a Western artist does a making of. Maybe they'll go on a show like Good Morning America or Jimmy Kimmel or one of these people, and you'll get like one or two live stages, or they'll go on like a KEXP does these live things, but you might get like a few live videos.
Yeah.
So like I got into it through that because I was like, this is like really fun. The outfits are cool, like the settings are cool, they're doing cool dance moves, they look good, it's fun, whatever. It was just like a fun diversion. And I would watch that every once in a while. It still didn't become a thing, but like at one point I was like, wait a minute, like this song that's playing right now is actually good. And that was Twice Jelly Jelly. And it was like this really fun song with this fun backing beat that reminded me of the song Hey Mickey, You're So Fine, You Blow My Mind from the 80s. And it kind of like, so I've used this term when I do like my write-ups about K-pop that is like the 80s, but more so. That's this whole like strain of
Mm.
K-pop where
Mm-hmm.
it, to me, at least the way it comes off is like if you went back to that super fun, cheesy 80s music, but kind of like dialed up the colors and the contrast and put in modern production and like updated the special effects and whatever. Like if you kind of like modernized it and made it even more the way it is.
And you've said that's partly coming from a certain producer who's very into 80s music.
Well, that song and some of that stuff is from JYP,
Mm-hmm.
who leads the company that Twice is part of, and he actually, like me, said that the thing that made him into music and then led towards where he is Michael Jackson.
Okay, interesting.
And also like just
It all
that
comes back to Michael
80s
Jackson.
music. That's like a strain of K-pop.
That's not all of K-pop at all, but it was sort of
No,
your entry point.
it's a certain sound.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I watched another video and I was like, this song is cool. And that song was Signal by Twice. And then I was like, okay, who is Twice? And that's what moved me like towards really like falling down the rabbit hole, or it inched me towards it because I started Googling them and found my way to the Twice subreddit, and I like searched what groups are like Twice, and I found like some discussions. And a really funny thing, that's how I found Dreamcatcher, because in this post that I found on the Twice subreddit that was like, what K-pop groups are like Twice, someone told people to listen to Dreamcatcher,
Huh.
which now like coming
Doesn't
at
make
it
sense.
from a music fan perspective makes like no sense,
Uh-huh.
because they are almost as far apart as you can get and be female fronted K-pop. But if you're coming at it from the fandom perspective and you understand that someone who is an Insomnia, which is a Dreamcatcher fan, is going to take any and every available opportunity to tell people to listen to Dreamcatcher, then that makes perfect sense.
So,
Um,
okay.
and
So it's like this level of fandom where you just are beyond even caring about the music. I mean, the type of
yeah, it's
music.
like,
You're
here's a
like,
person who's open to finding something new. I'm going to tell them to listen to Dreamcatcher.
yeah.
And for listeners, that they have a very metal influenced sound that borrows a lot from goth as well in terms of like the imagery and the vocals. Twice is like generally a lot more upbeat.
And I know you've sort of moved away from Twice for various reasons in the last couple of years. Are you in Insomnia? Like, is Dreamcatcher
No,
still
I'm
no?
not quite an insomnia, but um, I like Dreamcatcher. They're still one of my faves. They're like in my second tier, I guess.
Okay. Okay.
And Twice has just sort of fallen out for
Yeah.
various reasons.
So
They were
you
my
so you
my gateway drug.
yeah.
Um,
So you heard started listening to Dreamcatcher, and at that point you've heard this hyper 80s sound, and now you're hearing this metal sound. And so then what's happening in
so
your
what's
mind?
happening is I'm like, there's a lot of different things going on, and to me, I find it very sort of puzzling, or I don't know how to say it. Just it doesn't connect at all to me when people talk about how K-pop is exactly like Western pop or is completely derivative of it, because it just, I
It
don't know
just
how you
isn't.
could hear it and hear that, because it just sounds, K-pop goes all over the place. And like there might be you could probably point to like a particular song being similar to another particular song, but like the whole thing is is so vast and also goes to so many places that Western pop like doesn't go very much anymore or doesn't has never gone.
So you were on this journey for a long time of pushing the envelope of innovation, and K-pop has kind of brought you to this universe where you can cast a wide net of not derivative, but like developing these sounds,
Yeah,
spinning off kind of
it's
from,
definitely riffing off sound.
yeah,
And there's endless and infinite debate that I have in my time gotten into on like what is originality anyway,
yeah.
you know? That is a very fraught question. You know, everything comes from something.
So the other aspect that we haven't mentioned is that you're a philosophy major.
I am.
That's what got
I
you
was
to pay attention to academics at all,
indeed.
basically.
And
So what is
I'm thinking
originality?
back to like when I was deep in my philosophy days and I got into this on the internet with someone, and my position at the time is that there is no such thing as originality and it doesn't matter.
So even as you're looking for more and more innovative sound, you like fundamentally didn't believe in originality.
Yeah. Or at
Okay.
least like that was what I felt had to be the conclusion if you follow the definition in a very philosophically rigorous way, like according to the Western philosophy tradition. The concept just breaks down and makes no sense.
Whoa. Okay.
But or either that or it's like everything is original, but then if everything's original, then nothing's original. But I don't think that's quite the right way to, I mean, that doesn't fully cover the concept of originality, but I think there is something to it more than that being, you know, more of a post-philosopher now. But also it's just very complicated. And I mean, there's two things to say, which is that pulling things from different places and doing something new with them is original.
Mm-hmm.
And also that there's a lot of things to like about music other than originality. So I'll just
Mm-hmm.
leave off that topic
Mm-hmm.
with both of those statements. So we're in like 2021 in my story, and I'm starting to find things I like. I still was kind of like, this is this fun thing that I'm not sure about. And I just watch these videos for fun sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Not like this is something I'm totally into.
Mm-hmm.
And I started building up this playlist of K-pop videos, and that's when I started becoming more of a YouTube user and actually understanding how to use it and follow the sidebar to different things and just like how you can like go down these pathways and find things. So I found like some Red Velvet songs, who's been my favorite group for 3 years, and some ITZY songs and some more Twice songs and some Dreamcatcher and some Blackpink. And that was that. And now we're looping back to when I was talking about how I was like, I really need to get out in the world and like hear music and do that with my life that I have once people are able to do things again. And I was sort of like, how am I going to do that?
Even as you're listening to these K-pop songs, you're kind of still setting them aside as like not,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I was also like, that would be funny if I went to a K-pop concert. And, um, and I think I just like went to our K-pop, the K-pop subreddit, and just wrote tour in the search bar.
Uh-huh.
And like the top result is Twice. And I was like, are you serious? The one group that I have actually figured out that I like is the one that came to the top of the search result. And then I looked it up on Ticketmaster or whatever, and the initial sale had already happened and it was only resale. And the cheapest ticket available was $300. And that was that was just so outside of my reference at that point. Like I used to go to shows that were $5.
Yeah.
And
I mean, had you ever gone to a $300 ticket
no,
show?
no. I
No.
mean,
No.
I think I've paid maybe close to 100 to go to like an opera or something.
Right.
And I was just like, that's crazy. So I just sort of had that in the back of my mind. And it was like the day of that concert when it actually happened in Oakland, which was February 17th, 2022,
Uh-huh.
that I that was like the day I like super fell into it. Like I was just like I think I was just like moping around all day about how I like wasn't going to the concert. And
Because this you had already decided this is like your life's purpose. I mean, not your life's purpose, but it's what brings you joy. It's what makes it
yeah,
meaningful to be with people, to be post-pandemic.
yeah, but I just didn't quite make the leap that like I should go to this.
Yeah.
And then I was just on the subreddit like watching people like post videos of it and I was just like, "Oh my God." And I just started just totally listening to Twice like nonstop. Like I think I didn't listen to like anything but Twice for,
Uh-huh.
as you are aware, for like 2 months or something.
Hmm.
So that was how I sort of just completely dived into the deep end, but my completist and archivist kind of tendencies also went into this. So once I got into Twice, I needed to make a playlist that was like every single Twice song that's ever come out in order and listen to that.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I started to like get into other groups, but I started to have this like pretty systematic way of doing it on YouTube. And I started learning Hangul and learning how to like pronounce things and learning all the members' names and blah 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 like and going back through the discography and finding like all the different performances and doing all that. And I felt at that point like a sense of community in the Twice subreddit. Like they had this weekly thread that was just like this chit chat and it was just very friendly and very all over the place. They would talk about whatever was happening in K-pop or sometimes other kinds of music or sometimes not to do with that at all, like just stuff going on. And it was very chill and would be like visited frequently. So if you load it in the morning and then you load it in the afternoon, there's like more stuff going on. That was like part of feeling like I am a Twice fan because I like do this. I like hang out in this space and know all this discourse about which member did what when and blah blah blah
Hmm.
and like who has which kind of personality and just like falling into that whole like fandom thing where you get super into the people in a irrational way because they're actually just people but
Well, the
you
personas.
you get
Yeah.
into the persona. Yeah, you're not really getting into the person. You're getting into
Yeah.
the persona and getting kind of like wrapped up in that. And so then they wrapped up that tour and then they decided to do an encore concert in LA. And I felt like, this is like a calling. Like they're actually coming. I had that experience where I deeply regretted not going to that. And then I came back. So I just decided I had to do that and had this kind of absolutely crazy experience, like taking the train down there. Instead of paying 300, I balked at paying 300. I ended up paying 400 for that ticket. And I had like, this is my first experience with the whole Ticketmaster thing where you go into the queue and like 30,000 people join the queue. I had never even been remotely interested in anyone where anything like that happens.
Hmm.
So that whole experience was new. But yeah, like I went down to LA. It just was incredible. It's hard to describe the feeling of it. And it's kind of an irreplaceable experience, like having that experience after coming through a pandemic and barely going anywhere, not being in like a exciting concert type environment for many years prior to that, and like understanding that I was gonna follow this pathway of fandom and then just completely going all the way into it, getting the light stick and all that stuff. And then kind of like another amazing aside with that is that I went to that concert 2 times because it was in 2 nights in a row. And the second one had a lunar eclipse.
Hmm.
And I got to sit and watch a lunar eclipse like for an entire concert,
Hmm.
which was really incredible.
I guess I think what I'm most interested in now after this conversation is What are you currently into, and does it feel completely different than the past? Like it's
Yeah,
perceived as completely different than your musical past. Does it feel like that to you? Or do you feel like, maybe it's a different angle, but do you feel like it's a continuation?
I feel like some aspects of it are a completely new thing for me, and then a lot of it is not. So, yeah, from that point I described, I spent probably the next year or so, like mostly only listening to K-pop because there was so much K-pop to listen to, and it was all new to me and it was all incredibly exciting.
So you were really finding, you talked before about casting a wide net to maybe find these gems of music that bring you joy, and you were just like gold mine, like gem after gem
Yeah,
after gem
this,
of,
so it
yeah.
wasn't a totally different process, but it was like now I know where to dig.
Yeah.
I've got my mine that I can go into, and it is incredibly productive.
hmm After like a decade and a half of
It
sort of
being like less
wallowing.
productive. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was also an audio-visual way of appreciating music, which I talked about as something that is new and following it like via the music videos, making these big playlists of all the music videos that I like, and then the way that the so when a new album comes out, it's always called a comeback. They
Okay.
use that term even if their last album came out 4 months ago. Every time
Okay.
they put out a new thing, it's a comeback. It's just a word that they just adopted and decided it means something else.
hmm
And the comeback cycle has all these things that go into it. Like there's a whole teaser cycle where they put out some pictures that are supposedly supposed to have something to do with the mood of the album. Sometimes they absolutely have nothing to do with it, but
Right.
there's some interesting examples of that. But often they at least try to set the mood. They put out some like videos, they put out little snippets, and then the album comes out, it has a music video, and then there's this music show cycle where there's music shows on air Tuesday through Sunday. The most typical day for a comeback is Monday. So usually they come back on Monday, usually skip the Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday through Sunday, they're on the music shows, and you get these really awesome live stages. And then they do like the Tuesday, maybe the Tuesday through Sunday the next week. And sometimes if you're lucky, they'll go a third week.
So it's very immersive. Like
Yeah.
you can be
And they're
entertained the
doing
whole time.
appearances in different places. So you get, and also they use the word era. Like in Western music, I would talk about like Ministry's synth pop era, which was 5 years, and then their industrial metal era, which was 10 years or something. But every single one of these in K-pop is called an era. Like that whole time period surrounding before the album comes out to like when they peter out their activities, that's an
hmm
era. And then,
Okay.
a few months later, there's a new era.
Yeah, and a lot of people here would just be like, "That's our album tour,"
Right.
but it's a
There,
lot more.
there's a concept. So each comeback has a concept. So like Red Velvet put out this song called Feel My Rhythm, and it had this kind of ballerina concept where they dressed as like weird ballerinas and had this very dreamy, like Midsummer Night's Dream type of thing. And that was the aesthetics visually for that whole comeback time period. And then next they had Birthday, which was all kind of like wild and colorful and cartoonish, so they had like this whole different look
hmm
that time. That's incredibly interesting to me. Like you just have all this stuff that you can get engaged with and get interested in or re-engaged with these new aesthetics that they're putting out, as opposed to like a band like Metallica. They got their look in 1983 and that was their look
hmm
until maybe they changed it a little bit 15 years later.
Well, and I'm even thinking about, you were talking earlier about going to, I think, experimental or industrial shows, people just showing up in jeans and the t-shirt because it meant something to not care about your aesthetics, right?
Yeah, there's a strain of the underground where the idea is to be very functional and to like not be concerned with appearances.
hmm But when I think about that, it makes me think about the neutrality of white culture, that like white culture, jeans and t-shirt, American culture is considered like a neutral, like there could possibly be a
Yeah.
neutral aesthetic. We were talking about Western philosophy separating out noise from aesthetics in order to make a separation and pretend like these other things don't matter. You have to create a zero or a neutrality point, and often that's just like whiteness.
Yeah.
And so this is completely different. I mean, you're saying let's just like totally explore this one aesthetic and then jump to the next one and just explore it in every way that we can think of for a
Yeah, and
few
it's
months.
very much like celebrating the spectacle and
Mm-hmm.
the the bigness of it, and is sort of in, one of the books I read was called The Society of the Spectacle when I was more of a theorist in grad school, Guy Debord, and that I think that concept was looked down on, and like we need to be authentic and get away from that. So yeah, this is, I think it's pretty like postmodern in a way, and is just like, let's just have fun with whatever.
Yeah.
Like musically, they just they'll just do kind of whatever. So another thing that I should talk about is that now that I know the history of K-pop, because of course I learned that, there was kind of like this decade where it got more out there and experimental, and also used a lot of like more in your face aesthetics and a lot of like campy aesthetics and things like that. That was like roughly 2011 to 2022, and really peaked from
Right when you jumped
2018
in.
to 2022.
Mm.
There was kind of a sense that companies would just sort of throw out whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of K-pop is fandom based, where they had just have like this army of fans that will support them no matter what the music sounds like. But also that like created this space where a lot of the producers were just doing like whatever. And it was kind of amazing for me. I came in right like at the tail end of that. I didn't know that that was what was happening, and it was still happening. So no one really knew that. And I got to sort of like inhale that entire decade at once. And that was an incredible experience.
Yeah.
To me, like K-pop before that is not terribly interesting. So like when I think back on it, like it's interesting to think about how I had my entire life from the 90s to the now happening, and K-pop was happening that whole time. I just
Mm-hmm.
didn't know about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it just makes you think there's so many things going
Yeah.
on all the time. And when I think about that, in some ways, I needed to develop to a point where I could appreciate K-pop, but K-pop also needed to develop to a point for me,
Yeah.
because it wasn't really there in the 2000s and before.
Was it mostly like rock music? Like what was
No,
it?
it was, I mean, if any like early generation K-pop fans listen, they'll probably disagree or whatever, get offended. But to me, it's like just behind Western pop. Like it just sounded like a rehash and not very interesting,
Mm-hmm.
and like very safe, easy to listen to, kind of whatever
Mm-hmm.
music.
Were they singing in Korean?
Yeah.
Are there probably parts that were missing from Korean culture and that, like rehashing?
You mean that I'm missing?
Yeah, and talking about it as like a rehash of pop. There's probably
Oh,
some
I'm sure
elements
there are
that
things, that I'm just not appreciating or
yeah,
attuned to about it. Yeah, I wouldn't put that as like a gospel opinion. Just like just that it
the
comes
sound for
across that
you.
way to me,
Yeah.
is like there just isn't very much that I find very interesting going on. Obviously, like it was very meaningful to a lot of people who were into it at the time, and there's probably stuff that I don't know about or don't appreciate about it.
Yeah.
But like then, my biased take, there was this kind of like quantum leap in the 2010s. And I would pinpoint like Girls' Generation, The Boys, that song, and EXO Mama in 2012. And like Girls' Generation, I Got a Boy in 2013. Like those were some of the jumping off points. And then to me, things just got like really super interesting towards like the end of that decade and the beginning of 2020s.
So when you say those were jumping off points, can you explain to me, someone who's not a music person, how did it jump off from like an easy pop sound?
They brought kind of like a heaviness of sound into it
Mm-hmm.
and kind of like this high level of drama to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like a song where just kind of hits you in the face and doesn't let you keep it in the background.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
I've heard those songs for sure with you, so
those
I know what you're
are,
talking about.
like the first two songs I mentioned. Then I Got a Boy is just crazy. It's like a song that does like 12 different things. It keeps jumping to completely different musical ideas.
Mm-hmm.
It's very strange, and it's 4.5 minutes long, which is very long for a K-pop song. K-pop songs used to average like 3 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and now they are even shorter. And it has like this a part where they just shift to Taeyeon and Tiffany doing like total like diva level vocals just for the hell of it. And it just does all these different things. It's hard to describe, but it's a song that's been written about a lot.
Yeah.
I can probably link to it. And that became known as mix pop, like mixing different genres. And that was 2013. Red Velvet debuted in 2014 and has from then like consistently both went all over the place and went in like very experimental directions musically, and also often have like really funny campy aesthetics in their videos and their personas that they use.
Mm-hmm.
FX was another group that they kind of pushed the envelope with electronic music, like bringing EDM into K-pop. So there's just like a lot of stylistic exploration kind of all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you get later, you've got like Dreamcatcher doing their entire career was spent doing hard rock and metal focused K-pop songs. You had Luna, which was this very like interesting project with a really talented producer that can, I think, like he really understands how to make interesting electronic noises that tickle my brain, that
Mm-hmm.
that my electronic music brain.
Yeah. So there's that connection in some
Yeah.
of these things. Yeah.
And then what has happened since I got into K-pop is that that decade kind of started to wind down, that long decade. There was a group called New Jeans that debuted in the summer of 2022, and they had this more like throwback early 2000s pop, like very easy listening type of sound.
Mm-hmm. And they
And
got really popular when they came out,
they
right?
just like exploded. And also aesthetically, people were like, oh, they're just like girls next door or whatever. Like they just wear jeans or whatever. I don't know. I didn't
We were
watch them
just
that much
talking
because
about
I
that.
wasn't that into them.
Yeah.
But like they weren't like wearing ballerina costumes like Red
Yeah.
Velvet or things like that.
Yeah.
And that suddenly became this like huge wave. And I was jokingly calling it to myself like the new jeansification of K-pop, because it's like 70% of all girl groups in the next year or two tried out putting out easy listening pop music and just kind of having like a much, okay, biased take, like much more like bland aesthetic.
Yeah.
And that to me was not my favorite, but whatever. I'll just leave it to the side and follow what I like. And aespa like never did that. So I kept following aespa and Red Velvet, and NMIX kind of like dabbled in that for one comeback, and then they went back to being weird.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, I kept just, diving into different groups in the way that I do. Like I had a pretty systematic way. Like I sort of like start dabbling. I'm like, I've got a video or two that I think is interesting. And then there's sort of a point where the floodgate opens and I decide that I need to go through their whole discography. And so that's what
Mm-hmm.
I do.
Yeah.
And then delete out the songs that I don't like and make this whole playlist. I got into organizing this all in a spreadsheet. So, it's like wherever you go, there you are. Like it's still me doing spreadsheets and stuff. I just have a new thing.
Yeah.
I could talk a little bit about just being in fandoms, because I've sort of talked about those like different modes of following music, and being like a fan in that way is something I've never done. I never was a sports fan. I never really like followed anyone for the sake of following them, especially like post high school. And that, feeling of like watching an album come out And being there like right when it comes out and being one of the first people to watch the video and then like commenting with all the people who are watching it for the first time is kind of this new experience that has been part of this for me, like
Yeah,
just
this
following
it's
things
not
in
just
real
your
time.
joy. Like you were looking for those moments before just for yourself, but this is like a communal
Yeah, and
experience of
then
feeling. Yeah.
hopefully it's good. Sometimes it's not, but
But you're
whatever.
sharing it with people, even if it's
Yeah.
not. Yeah. I'm also curious about how that intersects with the political landscape right now, which is so dire with fascism creeping in everywhere. I know a lot of the scenes you were in before could be very political. K-pop doesn't tend to be as overtly political. So I'm wondering how you see your cultural involvement with K-pop generally intersecting with politics right now.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because K-pop groups themselves don't usually take any kind of overt political stances unless it's very safe, like donating money to the children or something. I don't know, something that wouldn't even be seen as political per se.
Yeah.
And there's that.
Because it's so corporate, right? It's like this big corporations a lot of
Yeah,
time.
they're formed by a company. The company wouldn't want to get in the crosshairs of anyone in particular or any fans that believe certain things. So they sort of shy away from stuff that could be controversial. Then separately, there is the international fans, and when I say international, I mean outside of South Korea. That's sort of a whole, at least the fans that I encounter on the internet is a whole other kind of world that has different concerns and different beliefs, I guess, or that's just a whole different thing. So
You think the international fans have some a kind of like expectation in terms of politics of K-pop groups that they love or like a
yeah,
standard? Yeah.
and those communities can be active politically. I mean, the spaces that I kind of get involved with have pretty left-leaning politics among the users who go to that. So that's always kind of an interesting dynamic that you have this fan base that has a political stance and wants to see certain things, and we're all fans of this type of group and kind of this thing that tends to not take political stances. So the fandom itself can be active in certain ways that the artists themselves don't get into. And
Yeah. And an example of that is the kind of famous time when K-pop fans sold out a Trump rally and then didn't go to just like tank the rally in the
yeah, that was kind of a funny way of trolling the 2020 Trump campaign that I learned about early in my K-pop journey. Back in 2021, I had found out that this had happened, and I thought that was kind of cool. I think another example that came kind of early when I was discovering this stuff was in a BTS video for a song called Not Today. And basically the kind of the theme of the song is like one day we might lose, but that day is not today. And
Mhm.
I found that song like early in 2022, and it happened to be around the time, I think it was maybe even the same week, that the Russian invasion into the Ukraine was starting. And so I go to the YouTube video, and at the top, there's this comment that is like, I'm from Ukraine and I listen to this song every day, and it makes me think about how we're not giving up and stuff like that.
Mm.
And that
So kind of
felt
like
really
general
inspiring to me.
humanitarian
Yeah,
themes.
or just
Yeah.
feeling, maybe actually the song itself, then I sort of looked into it, and it does have, because BTS writes their own lyrics, unlike a lot of groups, and
Mm.
actually does have a kind of political backdrop. It is more about the way that younger generations are being treated in South Korea as lesser, and just things that people are going through, young people in South Korea.
Okay.
That's a whole story, and it actually was super interesting to learn about when I looked into that, but then kind of how it's
Yeah.
interpreted by possibly assuming this is genuine, like this Ukrainian person on the other side of the world, like listening to the songs was very inspiring to me at the time.
Mhm.
So those are just some examples, and there's our examples in the other direction of things that I've that have happened or things that I learned that were not very agreeable, like where people use symbols like Nazi symbols or other things that just are taken totally out of context, and then they kind of issue some really lame apology and just sort of brush it off like it
Yeah.
didn't matter, you know?
Yeah.
In the kind of online fan wars, people will say, oh, well, they're in East Asia. They wouldn't, have the same importance or feel the same importance to that. But it's like, you know, you're marketing internationally, and it's not like it's hard to know what these things mean. So just some things like that have been pretty disappointing, but, try not to get too invested in that because ultimately we are not really privy to the inner beliefs of these people because they don't share them.
Yeah, and they're kind of constructing a persona as part of
Yeah.
their stardom and stuff.
So you
Yeah.
just basically can choose to be a fan of the persona and follow it. And if something happens and you're not happy with it, you can leave it behind. And that's that. But I guess kind of in terms of how K-pop kind of inspires me and how I feel like it fits in with this moment for me, because it did come to me and sort of lift me up out of a time period that was really dark for me, like the first Trump regime and COVID and other things that were happening at the time. And I think ultimately, at first I was kind of getting like probably too invested in these stories, like, oh, they sold out the Trump rally. It's so like revolutionary, whatever. It's not necessarily, but it's how it affects me individually by inspiring me and bringing me joy and making me feel like getting out of bed in the morning and making me feel like I know who I am and I know what I like. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that in and of itself is a really powerful thing, just understanding yourself and what brings you joy and having that as something that you can go back to and feel good with, because ultimately, joy is kind of a tool of the fascists. They use that. It's like first they scare you, they say everything is going to hell, and we're the people that you feel at home with or you feel joy with. And that is part of their kind of recruitment process.
Yeah.
So I feel like, I guess, knowing yourself and knowing how you can find that without them is a really powerful thing.
Yeah. So it's not really about what individual groups or people who are K-pop stars or even the companies believe necessarily. It's more about not even like the fandom as a collective, but the fandom as a source of joy and a culture that gives you kind of a sense of community that can't be co-opted by fear, it seems like.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I would
Yeah.
say.
And I'm also thinking about earlier in our discussion, you talking about just digging through your archives and kind of being lost and like unbounded need to review everything, not really knowing where you wanted to go and how it got so much easier once you really knew what you liked. And K-pop helped teach you that. And, that's all. I mean, when you're kind of lost in your own archive and thinking that you need to look at everything, it's another one of those shoulds, right? Like, I should review every single album, even if I'm not
Yeah,
that into it. I should do this. And you're sort of vulnerable to political groups or whatever that say, like, we have the answers, we have the structure for your life.
yeah,
And if you can structure your life around joy, that gives you a kind of cultural immunity, I guess, I would hope, too, being co opted by these movements.
yeah. I think it helps.
Yeah.
Earlier, I was talking about the early years of K-pop, got to stuff like in the 2000s and the late 90s that I was not really as inspired by that stuff. And you were talking about, maybe there are things I'm missing.
Yeah.
That made me think of another podcast that I listened to called K-pop Dreaming, that's available on the LAist, and maybe we could link it. But it's a really interesting story about a woman who I think is probably around your age or my age in terms of how she describes herself, a Korean American woman growing up in LA and finding K-pop in the late 90s and 2000s and how much it meant to her at the time. And I think really brings out like what was special about that time to me,
Uh
that,
huh.
from this perspective that is just completely different from my own way of finding my way into K-pop. But I think also just, illustrates the many ways that K-pop can be exactly what a person needs. And that's a
Oh,
beautiful
yeah.
thing.
Yeah. So we should definitely link that. Do you remember what she said kind of about like why it meant so much to her?
I think in terms of describing the music, I don't think I'll be super good at that. I think I'll have to lean on go listen to the podcast. But
Yeah.
but I do remember it. What I found really cool about it, like she talked about it really helping to define herself as a Korean American, as having that identity
Mm-hmm.
and being like really not one or the other, like not exactly Korean, not exactly American,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe all of both or something. But that part of it was really interesting, and just the context of how she found it like was so different from now. Like you had to go to Koreatown in Los Angeles to
Yeah.
have like any chance of encountering anything like that in that time period. And
Ironically, like not that far away. I mean, you were talking before
yeah,
about
there.
having to go to LA to find
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. It also makes me think of like how LA was right there when I was
Yeah.
that age, and I found some things there, but there's so many communities and so many things going on.
Yeah.
And, like there's these music shows that I watch. Earlier, I talked about how you get so much great content as a K-pop fan. You get all these like different types of
Yeah.
videos that come out, and we're in this like age of abundance where it all just comes to YouTube, and I just open my phone or open my computer, and these music shows where they do performances just come on right afterwards. I get to see it,
Yeah.
and like back then, the music show would happen in Korea, and some weeks or months later, VHS tapes would be shipped and would make their way to the video rental shop in Koreatown that
Uh-huh.
carried them. And then
Uh-huh.
you could go there and rent the VHS tapes. And that's how you could
Uh-huh.
see those music shows.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
really different kind of thing.
Well, it's interesting too because it's a whole different perspective on this idea of like constructing identity and culture and joy together, you know? Like it meant something different for her, but in a way it's giving your life this like structure and purpose. I mean, that is parallel kind of to what you found.
Hmm.
Yeah. I was gonna say something else, but I lost my thought there for a second again. Let me think. Oh, I remember. So I was talking to a friend about this episode, and she was suggesting, maybe it's not so much like a huge change in your life, but rather just having a monotropic focused interest where you do this deep dive into noise and experimental new music for like 20 years. And then now you're doing this deep dive into K-pop. And that resonated, but I also was thinking about how your interest in these things, it's more than just there's you and you have an interest and you follow that. It's more like, to me, at least from what I see, this is an interest that kind of shapes who you are, you know? Like when you said about that podcast, K-pop helped her define herself as Korean American. And when I see you just finding your joy with K-pop and finding this culture, it shapes who you are, you know? It's not just something you as a separate person are pursuing, but being someone who does these concerts is a big part of who you are. And maybe it's just a reflection or a continuation of a part of you that's always gone to like 80s music dance nights or whatever, but you're getting to expand that part of you. And I also see that like the joy is not just, oh, I like this song. The joy is like getting to express a part of yourself that has so much room in this culture that K-pop has created.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I don't know that well, I don't know, we need to debate that on the podcast. I'm not sure I completely agree about the thing about it being monotropic, but I'm also wary of defining myself, so. But the engagement with it is something that is very new for me in the past couple decades.
Hmm.
I'm engaged way more, and it has caused me to like loop back around to all my other music as well, because eventually I did kind of listen to all the K-pop that I wanted to, and I just got to the point where I was following new stuff when it was coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So then I started branching out in other directions. I've listened to a lot of Japanese music. I'm finding like a ton of really good Japanese rock music,
Mm.
and I've tried listening to a lot of like Western pop that I ignored for years and found some good stuff, but also just like re-listening to my whole thing, like once again, like all that stuff that I've accumulated.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like so much easier for me to come to a conclusion now. For a long time, I was like, I know all of this is important to me, but I don't know what to keep and what not. And
Mm.
I just felt like very muddled. Like I would listen to an album, re-listen to it and be like, yeah, like this reminds me of times in my life that were good. This is important. Like I do think that this music is historically important. There are things I like about it. Some songs I like more than others, but I'm not sure. I'll just leave it in my
Mm-hmm.
collection and think about it later and
You kind of
whatever.
lost your like compass.
Yeah, I really relate to this moment in that show, The Maid, the woman who was abused and went to a home. But like when she first goes to the shelter and they
Oh,
take her to the place where you can pick out clothes and they're like, just pick out whatever you want. Like, what's your favorite color? And she's just like, I don't know. And then she goes through a lot through the course of the show, and towards the end, she's going to like this court hearing with her previous partner and wants to dress well for it. And she walks in and she's like, I'll take baby blue, my favorite color.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I feel like something like that has has happened in my life. Like I go back now and listen to, say, all the music by Depeche Mode that I accumulated, and I'm just like, yeah, I like this song. I don't like this song. I like this
Mm-hmm.
song. I don't like this song. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
incredibly clear. And then I just have the songs I like, and I can jam that playlist whenever I want. And
Yeah.
it's I don't know, that there's something that is like that, some kind of like switch that turned on that made me engage with music like the way I used to, and in a way that's like a lot clearer to me.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's beautiful. It's a inner compass and sense of self. And I mean, I think everybody needs that, but maybe finds it in different places, right? Like,
Yeah.
not everyone's going to find that in music so definitively, but for you, it's really important.
Yeah.
And so, like, finding this whole world of K-pop and the joy in the songs and the joy of discovery, like, joy gives you a compass. I mean, that's a whole unschooling principle, right? Joy gives you a motivation. Joy gives you a compass. You know, yeah, that's really cool. I love that. Okay, cool.
Cool.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna put all these things in the notes of various songs and links and stuff because this is really rich if people are interested. Thank you.
Cool. Bye.